And we have with us this afternoon Dr. We were just talking about Arsalan Geula, who is an
I was telling you I have bad memory for names. You tried to convince me that this is correct.
You're trying to make me feel at home.
Who is an endocrinologist who has a PhD in cardiology, and he is speaking to us this afternoon about the forces of evolution. So please join me in welcoming.
Thank you. I'm so happy that before me, many people, speakers like Wolfgang and Dr. Ronald and also Dr. Irfan, they all talked about things that is related to what I'm going to say. And my talk is really a misnomer. It could be talked about forces of life or forces of cosmos or forces of the universe. But because I have done evolution in the past, so I'm going to talk a little about evolution today. And the thing is that when we talk about evolution and forces of evolution, as you remember, I've given talks before, so I'm not going to talk about evolution per se, but we're going to review very briefly a little bit about history of evolution, like Darwin, neo-Darwinism, and things like that. And also in the past, I had now talked about a new topic, which is called epigenetics. And I'm going to spend a little more time this time about epigenetics, because that is becoming very popular now in biologists, among the biologists, and also among people. But what is more important than anything else about my topic, or any topic actually when we talk about science, is how do we relate the Baha'i writing to the sciences? And as you know, Geula and Abdul Baha and the Baha were not scientists, but they have a lot of revelations or having a lot of discussions in terms of, particularly Abdul Baha, about sciences. And when it comes to evolution, particularly Abdul Baha has a lot of discussions about that. So how do we think about that? How do we interpret his revelations? So that is, we are going to, this is Abdul. Is there a picture? I think the sun is coming in, huh? Okay. And so we want to start with this topic because that is a few sentences in the Abdul Baha's statements is very troublesome to interpret, and is very troublesome in view of the scientific advancement of today. And one of the sentences is this: man from the beginning was in this perfect form and composition. Do we take it literally? If we take it literally, no, I'm just bringing it out so we can discuss about that. If we take it literally, so that would mean that so we don't believe in evolution, we believe in creation. Okay, if we can take, if we believe in evolution, how do we reconcile it? What about the principle of harmony, science, harmony of science and religion? And so that is really something that we, encourages us and forces us to think. You know what? I love to. I don't love just to talk over my head. And some I talked about this. I have some. We just pass it on. This is the bibliography, and I encourage anybody who gives talks. They bring bibliography. What is bibliography about? Just pass it on. No, you can keep one and pass the rest on. Right here, you can have more. What this bibliography tells you, it not just only tells you the name of the sources that the author is using, but what else it does? It encourages us to ask questions. If I come here and tell you something just because I'm a doctor, you shouldn't believe me. No, that's true. That's the truth. The fact of the matter is, and I'm going to review some of those things, that if anybody comes here and tells you, anybody, doesn't matter, this is this and that, you want to know why is this and that. I think you should learn, or we should learn, to think about something, not just accept something because an authority figure, or what you think he might be an authority or she might be an authority is telling us. So that is why it is so important that we start to think, how do I, if a seeker comes to me and asks me, what do I answer? And I just did this for myself and just share it with you, so it is a visual cue as what we are talking about. That is the Baha'i writing. In this respect is a lot of Abdul Baha's writing. We have many different understandings understanding when I'm the first sentence we saw, right? People will give you different versions of their understanding. So our understanding can be different, but because I say something that you don't like because you or somebody else, or you tell me something that I don't like because my idea is different, I should not construe it that we are against the writing of the Baha'i faith. Or we should not tell each other that, well, you're insulting me, or I'm insulting so and so. No, we are not. This is our understanding. The Baha'i writing stays there. The Baha'i writing is there for everybody to see. But my taking is very different. Some Baha'is will tell you, no, there was from the very beginning a human being who was created like us. There was no evolution. Evolution was for other animals. There are others who will tell you, no, there was one single who became a human, and that's totally wrong in my judgment. But these are different understandings. So the point is that we need to think and create our own way of thinking and be critical. When you say something, even if I'm trying to make a statement, I have to go research and bring some scientific reasons why you're saying this or that. And talking about sciences, one of the things that I want to share with this video, it is very, very important. I'm sure every one of you have heard about the Lohe Teb, or the tablet to the physician by Baha'u'llah. Zainul Mugharabi was, I think if I'm not mistaken, one of the only one or the only person who could ask Baha'u'llah about questions. If you look at Ahdas, there are some questions Zainul Mugharabi was asking. And in that tablet, Baha'u'llah has a sentence at the end which is very difficult to understand. And Zainul Mugharabi asked Baha'u'llah, said, what did you mean with this sentence? Before Baha'u'llah answered, and that is the point that I'm raising here. Before Baha'u'llah answered, he said, our purpose was set forth in accordance with what the people believe and what the people understand. So that is really, really important to remember that even Baha'u'llah is talking about what the people believe and what the people understand when he talks to them. Why it is so important? Because, to give you another example, all of you have studied some answered questions, right? Baha'u'llah, Abdullah has this tremendous gift, like a genius, of explaining very difficult things in a simple term that everybody can understand. It is very well known, even the Arabs, everybody knew, Abdullah knew that he had this kind of a gift to explain you in the most difficult situation, most difficult concept in a very simple way. How many of you have read Tablet to the Augustine Forel by Abdul Wahab? I have to tell you, I read it, but I have difficulty to understand it. Look, this is the same Abdul Wahab, but the recipients are different. This is some answered questions, or people who are not scientists, humble people. He asked them questions and he answered it according to the understanding of those people, right? And when he writes to a scientist, top-notch scientist of his day, like Augustine Forel, a philosopher, he writes it totally in a different dimensions. Why? Because the recipient is different. And that's what Baha'u'llah explains to Zainul Mugharabi, that we speak according to the understanding and belief of the people. Why this is so important? It is so important because Abdul Wahab talks about evolution was said 100 years ago. 100 years ago there was no genetic, there was no biochemistry, there was DNA was not known. There was only one concept that many Baha'is get it wrong. And that what they get it wrong is this. I hear again and again that Abdul Wahab said that like the child in the womb, so was the evolution of man in the world. They call it phylogenesis in a capitulation of embryogenesis, or embryogenesis is in a capitulation of phylogenesis. This did not come from Abdul Wahab. If you read Abdul Wahab carefully, he will tell you the philosophers of the West are saying. Who are those philosophers? That was Mr. Haeckel, a German scientist in 1850 something. He published a book, and in his book he compared all the picture of the embryo, how the embryo progresses and the phylogenesis, so it became called the recapitulation theory. And every high school kid learns this nowadays. They call it recapitulation theory. So what Abdul Wahab is referring to is not that Abdul Wahab made that statement and that has to stick and has to be forever this way and we are not going to change it. No, that is what was known up to the time of Abdul-Wahab. Okay. So, we will state now let's see what this says. Abdul-Wahab says, let us suppose that there was a time when man walked on his hands and feet. And that is really the sentence that has created a lot of different interpretation. And I put it there here, and we're going to spend a little more time on it. Or had a tail. So, but he was from the beginning in a very special species. Now, there is one thing that you got to remember when you say perfect human being. In Persian, it is called insan kamil. Insan kamil is a little different than a perfect human, because insan also refers to your morality, to your ethic, to your soul. So it's a little bit more general and encompassing than just a perfect human. But so some have concluded from this sentence that Abdul-Wahab talks about. Oops, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Some concluded that because Abdul-Wahab mentioned you had a tail, the people were walking like animals and had tail and stuff like that. So they said, you know what? There was the God decided that this one single cell in the somewhere, I'm going to make him another human. And from the very beginning, that one cell developed into a multi-cell and then became mammals and then so. But from the very beginning, that's the way they take it. But that is totally wrong. Abdul-Wahab never talked about that, and there is no scientific validity for that. All what you have to remember this. Against this, that I put this here. I use this again. It took. Earth was created about 4.5 billion years ago. And it took about maybe half a billion or a billion to develop one cell. And then it started about another some billion to multi-cell, eventually human. But just imagine, according to that theory, you have one cell. You know, one cell divides itself in 20 minutes, in 2 cells. And if you can you realize in 1.5 billion years, 1.5 billion years, how many billion and zillion of that one bacteria that you are supposed that God has chosen to become a human would be? The other thing against it is that there was no one mammal created in one place. They call it convergence. There was many mouses appearing in many continents. They looked different. Even the human line, they were not one line, they were 4 or 5. And they became only one. So we ran into humongous amount of problems. So this kind of statement that God chose one cell from the very beginning to become a human, that is what Abdul-Wahab is saying is pseudoscience. So if anybody tells you that, anybody make that statement, they should come out and prove to us how they come to that. Where is the scientific show for that? Okay? So that is why it is important how we interpret the Baha'i writings. And that is why I think my talk is really part of it, is how do we go along and interpret the Baha'i writing? Because otherwise, how can I talk about forces of anything, right? Abdul-Wahab still on science and religion. You know, this is very important because I mentioned that Abdul-Wahab's talk was about 100 years ago. You see, 100 years ago, a lot of things has changed. Abdul-Wahab even mentions that. So, sciences of former ages and philosophies of the past are useless today. You know how long ago Abdul-Wahab said this? 100 years ago. 100 years ago he said those things are useless. Who could imagine we have today's faxes, cell phone? If Abdul-Wahab would in his talk, table talk, tell people, look, you know, one day you have a little box, you get on your ear, you do this, people would not believe him. They would leave. So it was not because of Abdul-Wahab, it was because of our understanding. Anyway, let's move on to show you something else. Now, this is, remember, this is a curve showing the progress of sciences. And around 1800, it all of a sudden zoomed up. The amount of knowledge that has been gained in the last 100 years is thousands of times more than the time of Abdul-Wahab to us. Because in the past, the sciences really
and the technology, I don't know what's happening here, I cannot even find this today. It was really kind of stagnated. All the power there was a human and animal force. There was nothing else. Eventually, after 1850, and so on, after the discovery of Watt and other power, and of course before that you met with Galileo and other Kepler and Newtons and others, so the way was made ready for that kind of a discovery. But it goes so fast hard you cannot even imagine. When I went to medical school, books would change every 15 years. Then it became 10 years. Then it became 5 years. Then it became 3 years. Now, you have CDs they send you. Why? Because it changes so fast. Even something comes today, you have to look on the internet. Maybe tomorrow there is something else. Because we discover so much and so fast. So you cannot go back 100 years ago and compare the sciences of then with now and say, okay, we accept that explanation. You cannot do that. If you cannot do that, then how do we reconcile science and religion? You see, that is the time. Then we have to become clear for us that the statements about sciences by the master and other part of our writings are related to the fact of understanding and time of the thing. If we do that, then we are not into any trouble because the sciences are moving. Nobody talks anymore about Darwinian. Did you know that? They talk about neo-Darwinian nowadays. I get to that. Why? Because sciences is moving forward. We cannot sit back and watch what is happening unless we want to abrogate the principle of science, harmony of science and religion, which this is part of the, one of the major columns of the Bible, right? We cannot do that. That's a principle. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about evolution before I go into the forces of evolution. So, all organisms come, just to sum it up, they call on from other animals, and they're all related, and started about 4 billion years ago, and eventually developed genetic material, one cell, multi-cells, and eventually mammals and humans. According to this is not 100% correct, because there was a time when they thought everything happens at random and accidentally, but when I get to epigenetic, you realize that a lot of things have actually changed nowadays. And Leakey even said natural selection operates according to immediate circumstance and not toward a long-term goal. Is it getting a little warm here, or I'm just feeling that? Instead of the bibliography, I should have given you a fan, All right, let's move on. Now, I'm sorry, this is the kind of light you won't be able to see very good. But this is basically of saying how we understand things about 4.5 billion years ago, the Earth was created, and initially from the primordial soup, eventually one cell was created or developed, and eventually multi-cell, and eventually, you see, initially there was no oxygen. So the bacteria in the ocean developed chlorophyll, and then they developed oxygen. And eventually trees were developed, and then after that, after they developed no tree because they could use CO2 and give oxygen, so eventually could have land mammals, land animals. Otherwise they couldn't. So eventually it came like monkeys were about 34 million years ago, and about 2-3 million years ago they were hominid or the early ancestor of human, and about 160,000 years ago we had Homo sapiens, and a little earlier we had Neanderthals, which apparently they are saying now that some of the Neanderthals emerged with humans. We have like 3-4% of our genes are from Neanderthals. All right. Now we can skip this. We don't have much time about that. Now the argument in favor of evolution, why evolution is happening, is because, as I mentioned, they all are related. All the animals are related, except humans have consciousness and intelligence, and they're master of the environment, while the animal knows. By faith teaches us that we have soul, the animals don't. But other than that, we are all related. And this is very simple because, for example, if we look at the structure of the protein, they are all extremely close. And all the amino acids, they have the structure are the same. Otherwise, you couldn't even eat any meat anymore if they were different, because they come in amino acids and many chemicals come, they call it optic isometry. They come like the hand. They are like this, and they have a mirror shape. And humans have only the left side, not the right side. So that is very important to know. The other thing is, for example, many hormones are very similar. Like the pig insulin has 1 amino acid more than humans, and it has 100, like our 300 amino acids. Only 1 more than human. Beef, only 2 more than human. Actually, mice structure is very close to human. That's why they do a lot of experiments with mice. And we also use pig heart valve used for humans, and also hormone. Who had heard about desiccated thyroid or armored thyroid? And you can go on and on. Use horse serum, for rabies when you want to vaccinate, or use chicken pox. Smallpox vaccine was before coming from the cow that you would inoculate yourself. Now, fortunately, it is eradicated. All right. Now, what we call DNA molecule are also very close, and they have identical function. That this is very fascinating. Like the location of the gene that makes the eyes is exactly the same on the same location, on the same place, and it has almost the same function. And if you take that, for example, in a fruit fly and put it on his leg, he will develop an eye in his leg. And they have done that. So if you really, from that aspect, there is no difference. We're all, our bodies are like any other animal. So that is really shows that in that term we all come related to each other. Now, in terms of theory of evolution, we had Darwin, An Origin of Species was published in 1859. He talked about variation, selection, and survival of the fetus. And then eventually, later on, they added Gregory Mendel. He was a priest of Holland, I guess, and he was a botanist, and he developed the heredity, and genetic was discovered by James and Watson, DNA. So they added those things to the understanding and further development of understanding of Darwinian theory, and they call that neo-Darwinian. So they have come a long way from what Darwin was actually saying. Now, the chromosome, how do we, human bodies go about phenotype and genotype, we hear many times. The chromosome contains genes, and genes contain DNA. And genes are the genotype, that's the way we call them. And what they make, because they make the proteins, they call it phenotype. And in order to, and then some, not all DNAs are active, that's very important. And some may never produce any protein. And also there could be changes in the genes. They call it mutation. And some mutations are beneficial, some mutations are harmful, like you have seen maybe some babies that they don't survive because they have genetic defect. And so this is another showing how the gene works. DNA produces RNA, which goes into the inside, from the nucleus goes inside the cell, in the cell body, and produces the protein, which gives us our shape called phenotype. And analogy with music score is like this: that when you have a music score, say Beethoven has written, or Johann Sebastian Bach has written a very nice music. And you have this man comes in and plays, he says, you know what, I need to change this note a little bit. The music is the same, but each player would have their own interpretation of the music. So you hear different music. So you can compare the music notes or the genotype. And the way that it is played and you hear it is the phenotype. That is what it appears. And then how this can happen and sometimes it can change the genes is, imagine somebody changes one of the notes and says this sounds better. And the next generation adopts that. So that is the mutation because the gene has changed. You see, the score has changed. All right. Oh, I wanted to ask a question before that. How many have you seen giraffe? That's always, I love to ask these questions. How many of you have seen mice? Oh boy. So why mice neck is so small and giraffe neck is so big? Anybody wants to give me an answer?
Food?
No, food, no food mood. Tell me anatomically. Anatomically. No, anatomically. If you look at the giraffe neck, okay, let me give you an answer first. Mice has only 7 vertebral bodies. So therefore, this giraffe has 500, 20,
More
Seven.
than 7.
Oh, that's right.
7, she says more. He cheated, he's right.
7.
So why is that so? And remember this. Remember this. We have 7 too, don't worry. No, but remember this. We said homology. What it means, all the location of the genes are in the same chromosome and the same place. And almost are the same genes. Believe it or not, their structure is extremely similar. That's what I said, you know, the evolution is real. It's not a joke. And the reason is, the reason that the giraffe neck is longer because the genes are regulated. You see, just imagine yourself, you have an engine, you develop a rocket, and you want to send it to moon. You let it burn for 3 days. But if you want to send, you use the same rocket, you want to send it to Mars, you use it for 6 months. So this is the same thing. The gene of the mice neck works much shorter period of time. But the gene for a giraffe neck is works much harder and much longer of time. Okay? They call it gene regulation. That is something that is very, very interesting and becomes more fashionable. Now that leads us to the epigenetics. Epi means around or beyond. Means beyond genetics. Because up to some years ago, and after the gene were discovered, so everybody said, oh, everything is in our genes. It is true, not that it is not true, but there are also other things that affects the gene, and they call that epigenetic. Now let me explain to you, that's why Drew is here. Well, I don't think we have much time not to talk about anything else. But let me just show this to you. You see, this is a female and this is a male. And they have XX and male has XY. Now, they have 2 daughters. One daughter female have 2 X's and male have only 1. So when it comes to daughter, male have no choice. Female have no choice. You always inherit this X. But they have a choice which X they are going to inherit from the mother. So the question is, how come this one has this X, the other one has that X? So that is epigenetic, because there are other things that influences the gene. That is called epigenetic. And what they did, okay, I think we can forego this here. And the future of humanity, and we are going to have symbiosis with machine. Anybody who's interested, I have this is a really nice book. Anybody wants to read about the new machine, and we are actually mutating a lot faster than before. Because why? Because we have more population now. Because the more population you have, the more variety you have, and the more you can adopt. And okay, I think that was. 15 more. Okay, so that was about epigenetic. The other thing was that I think, where did it go? This was here recently. That's really very fascinating. As you know, the dogs come from which animal? What? Dogs. From wolves. So most probably our ancestors used thousands of years to tame these wolves. Okay. Now, there's a team of scientists in Russia have taken some foxes, and they have tamed them. And I didn't put it here, it took them about 30, 40 generations to tame these dogs, these foxes. And eventually, these foxes now are so tamed the generation they have. And what they're saying is this, that because of this, at the beginning, the taming and the captivity was so stressful for these foxes, it changed their hormonal level. When people are under stress, the epinephrine goes up, the norepinephrine goes up, cortisol goes up, growth hormone goes up, all those hormones become a kind of wacky, as you would say. And what they do, they would affect the gene activity. And maybe some of them, they had more of the genes that would apply them to become domesticated. They became more active, and eventually they took those ones. You know, all the animals you see today, they were chosen, eventually selected by the farmer, you know, for thousands of years. But they could achieve this. Of course, this is a new technology, new modern kind. They could do this with very few things. So very few years, 30-some generations, which is really not that long. So what that shows us that actually beyond gene, there are other genes they call epigenetic. And I have written it in my in my bibliography. If any of you are interested, you could read some of the books about epigenetic. And
the project is still going on, isn't it?
absolutely, this is still just the beginning of it. You're absolutely right. Thank you for reminding me of that. This is just the beginning of it, and that is really, for me, it is very interesting because it also tells us, also it brings up Lamarck, you know, and also this is very important about the Baha'i principle of having moral and ethic. Maybe they affect us, maybe they affect our future generation. It is in the writing that how a mother should behave when they are pregnant because it may affect the children, and this is all through the epigenetic because the genes is there. There is no difference in genes. So these are something that is coming. So this is now a new version of evolution. Is not only genes but also epigenetic and other factors. So that is what I have missed to let you know in the past. So I wanted to tell you this. And then we have the summary of neo-Darwinian heredity, genes, gene mutation, and neo-Lamarckian, because Lamarck said initially that the environment and what the people do will affect the future generation. But it showed that Lamarck, the way he made things was really wrong at that point. But eventually the epigenetic is going to add to some of the new Lamarckian. So we need both. It is not that Darwin is bad now or that Darwin was wrong. No, he was correct, but also there are other factors. So it is not genetic, but also epigenetic factors. Okay, we can go now. The human, what I think we talked about that. All right, now we get to the meat of my discussion with only 10 minutes left. Creation, okay, we have several forces. Creation, God is the creator, the sustainer, and the natural force, or life force, elan we talk, entropy, we talk about that, and about anthropic principle I talked before, biocentrism and the Baha'i face and evolution, about Abdul was writing and Baha was writing and Abdul. But you know, they're not really not contradictory. It depends how you look at it. You could take any of them and refute the rest of it, but if you really look with a different view, they are all complementary. They are not necessarily contradictory. Now let's move on. The issue really was raised some years ago, and I actually thought about it and many other people. Fortunately, I found out that this was said by a very prominent philosopher, and I'm bringing him next. The question really, we could move on and tell you. The question was really this: that if, according to the Darwin, the evolution went forward and we had newer animals and more perfect and more complex because of the fetus and selection of the fetus and natural selection, then why you needed to have more complex animals like humans, because they would die much faster if there was a catastrophe. As a matter of fact, for those of you who know, the dinosaurs were very complex compared with other animals that existed at that time, like 50, 60 million years ago, when the apparently asteroid hit the Earth and there was a winter, and all the higher mammals, all of them died, except the lower mammals survived. So if it was survival of the fetus, why we should get more complex and become more elaborated? Insect would survive a lot better if there is a catastrophe on Earth. Even bacteria, maybe they can even sit on a piece of rock and go travel from one galaxy to another. You know, that can happen. So that is why people were thinking, well, there may be something there. So the Henry Bergson, he was a philosopher, a French philosopher, who for the first time, at least that I know of, he wrote this over, and he wrote a book about that in 1907, and his name was Creative Evolution. It was in French, and so he said there might be a vital impulse or natural force that keeps the evolution going. So this is one force that a lot of people rely on. They say there is a force in the nature that propels the evolution and everything gets forward. Now the other thing is, that is one concept. The other concept I think was mentioned about the thermodynamic earlier. But we have two thermodynamic laws. Very briefly, one of them says that you cannot make a machine which gives you more energy than you can put in it. But you can never get more out of your car than the energy that you put in it, because some of the energy is always lost. They call it perpetuum mobile, first kind is impossible. So that is the first one. The other one is, this is, when we call about entropy, we're talking about thermodynamic second law. And that is that the energy will never flow from a lower level to a higher level. What it means here you have an ice cube, and this is a water which is warmer than an ice cube. The energy will never flow from the warmer water to the ice. If that was the case, ice would never melt. Right? And the reason ice melts is because ice absorbs the energy from a higher energy level to a lower, or whatever you want to call it, and that is why ice melts. The side effect, or one of the side principles of thermodynamics second law is that they call it entropy. What it really means is this, that any system you have, if you don't put energy in it, it will eventually become destroyed. Imagine yourself, you have a house. You know, tomorrow a brick falls, you have to repair it. Next morning, the plumbing is bad, you have to repair it. In spite of all of those things, maybe in 50 to 60 years, you lose your house, you have to build another. So they apply the second, the principle of entropy, saying that because of the loss of energy, in order to keep any system, you have to bring energy in. So they said, some people say, okay, this energy comes from cosmos, or coming from the sun, or we believe that there is a supreme being who provides this energy. So that is another way of looking at the forces of the evolutionary process and the forces of the whole universe and why mankind is keep going. And some physicists, I don't remember his name, there was even a guy who said because of the evolution, it has been going on the same argument that we're talking about. So he thought that you could, you know, cause the proof of God by this. But I think, to me, this is a little weak, but again, this is another way of proving God in some judgment of some people. Now, I need the next few slides to talk about entropy and the entropy principles. The thing is this, that in Law of Wisdom, or tablet of wisdom, Geula talks about the world of existence came into being through the heat generated from the interaction between the active force and the recipient. But anyway, what is really important is the heat, and the world came into being. So Geula describes the Big Bang. And to me, there are three things in the Baha'i faith that the Baha'i writing predicts that if you, at least the research I have done in a very summarized way, I found out that they were probably the first ones to indicate that. And one of them is this, because it was in 1920 and 1940s that they came to the Big Bang theory, that how the Big Bang and the universe started from the Big Bang. So Geula kind of predicted that about the Big Bang. And also, this is the other thing, is the Word of God. Word of God, exalted wisdom, is higher and far superior to that which sense can perceive, for it is sanctified from any property. And also it is important that indeed they created through the irresistible Word of God. This is word, I think, is the same one as the Gospel of John uses, you know. So this is the power. It's very hard to explain. It is not really, it's a will of God. It is a power of God. And anybody who wants to know more than that, is also another word for is emanation, how the God is created. And Irfan Colloquium has a very, very nice article. I don't know if he's here or not, but the article is one of the Irfan, and also you can look at it online to read more about emanation. So the Big Bang was about to start at about 10 minus 43 seconds, and that is an imaginary number, but if you can divide 1 second and put 43, the 10 with 43 zeros in front of it on the bottom, you know how long that is, how small that is. And eventually the temperature decreased, and at that time there was nothing else but electromagnetic wave. There was no atom, there was no nucleus, there was no electron, that we talked about it earlier. So that was the ideal world, there was nothing. And then it came a proton and neutron, and then electron, hydrogen, helium in the galaxies, and so on. And Big Bang theory, the formation of atom and life as we know them, the rate of expansion of the universe is very critical, because as you know, the universe after the Big Bang started to expand. Now, if it had expanded a lot faster, or just a little bit faster than what it really has done, all the element, all the nucleus and electron would fly from each other, would never come together. But it would be a little slower, it would coalesce together and form a mole. So again, we would not have had atom as we know them today to have any kind of creation. Now, the ages of the universe, we can forget about this slide. This is another slide showing the Big Bang and in Hubble developing that the universe is moving from each other and the background radiation. And so with all these things on the background, we come to the entropic cosmological principle. This principle says that the universe, it was meant from the very beginning to be created in such a way to create a carbon-based human being who would be able, would be intelligent enough to ask the question where I am, who I am, where I'm coming from, and recognize a supreme being or a supreme force. They leave it out. They are not really saying you could take it as an agnostic or as an atheist, or you can also be a God-believing person. And I have a reference for that. Anybody who wants to study this further. So this is so interesting because I had to go through all these slides to show you how the Big Bang was and how the universe was created, how the Earth was created after so many billion years. So if the slightest fraction of a second or an angle of degree of angle would be different, we would not have had what we know as now. Next, coming, in other words, the whole purpose and creation of the universe was to, can I have a few more minutes? Yeah. Produce an intelligent being who is capable of asking questions about his origin and the universe. So this is very, very really close to the Baha'i concept if we take a few more of that. And there was a French gentleman, a Baha'i from France, who has written a book about that. Unfortunately, I could not find an English version of that, about the Baha'i faith and the anthropic principle. And biocentrism is also relatively new. What it says is almost identical to anthropic principle. And it says that life is not an accident byproduct of the laws of physics. Life and consciousness are absolutely fundamental to our understanding of the universe. And he goes on to say, okay, now this is the famous cat he was talking about. I have shown this before. So imagine there is a curtain here. There is a curtain here, and then this is a radioactive material. And the catch is this: when in radioactivity, you know there is a radioactive material, but any given second you don't know if the matter has decayed or not, unless we human, as a human intelligent being, interfere in an experience. You see, that's the difference between thermodynamic and quantum physics than other things. You can see it here. You know the airplane landed in airport exactly, it took 1 hour, and you can calculate, you don't have to be there. But in physics, the microphysics or quantum physics, you have to be there, you have to interfere in the experience. So human's intelligence, human experience, human feeling become part of that experience. I think that's what
if you measure, you mean.
Sorry?
You have to measure.
Exactly, but you have to interfere in the experience. You see, you become part, more or less you become part of the experience.
So, but we become creators too, right?
You can say that too. I will not object to that. But anyway, that is a Denk model, so as the German would say. So there is a radioactive material, and this is a hammer, and this is cyanide. If this decays, it would break the glass, and the cyanide would be released, and the cat would be dead. So you can see the cat here. So say you put a curtain in front of it, you could say you wait 10 minutes, you don't know if the cat is dead or alive. So that's, you will say 50% the cat is dead, 50% is alive. Unless you as a human being interfere and lift up the curtain to see what is happening, you don't know. And why this is important is because human intelligence becomes a very important part of that, and that is what biocentrism kind of leads into. The space and time are not absolute realities, but rather tools of human mind. An existence of external realities requires time and space. Without presence of a conscious observer, the behavior of solid particle would exist in an undetermined probability. The world and Earth existed in an unstable condition. The existence of life and conscious observer made it stable. that's, I don't know if we should, if I go for it to that extent, but basically what the biocentrism are saying is that the human and intelligent interfering in the nature is absolutely necessary to bring about the nature as it is and as we know it. So, forces of evolution. Now, the other thing was, this is really also a kind of recent. I think we were talking about that before. I don't know which of the speaker of this morning was, that in the past you had the philosopher and the doctors and everything. One guy, Aristotle, was not only a philosopher, he was a physicist, he was a doctor, he was a moral preacher, he was a poet, he was everything. Then after Galileo came, everything split. During the time of Baha'u'llah came, the split was really bad. So that's why he said harmony, science and religion. If you look now at these things, I have a graph, but I didn't bring it with me. You see that they are coming now together. More and more physicists are now believing that life cannot be reduced to its element. That is called reductionism. Because during the time of Galileo, what happened afterward, the physicists and the scientific world were thinking anything in the world can be explained scientifically. Humans have a brain, humans have cells. Cells are made of atoms. And we can cut the atom into electron and thing and string theory or whatever not. But that doesn't explain life. So now they, or even does not explain even the smallest portion of life. So it's just like going to see, if you listen to a music, you can explain this, the airway hits your ear, the eardrum moves, the ear bones move, it gets to your seventh nerve, it goes to your temporal lobe, and then that is where you hear. But that doesn't explain what music is, that doesn't explain what you, let alone what your experience is from that. So life cannot be reduced to physical elements. That is what they are saying, that reductionism was at that time not aspect of life can be destroyed by law. Many physicists now believing in this. And I would really highly recommend you reading this book. This is not an easy reading. I had to read it several times, and I'm not saying that I understand it totally. But he is talking about, and I think everybody should read this, because he comes to the conclusion that, as I said, that there is more to life. You know, this is a process which has many, many different aspects. That is what life is all about. So you cannot just reduce it to one aspect and say this is what it is. So you have to bring everything together. But he takes a different conclusion. I think he's an atheist. But he says you can also come to the conclusion through his analysis that there is a creative God that created everything. So this is more or less the newer trend. And we have a lot of the writings of Abdullah that we have seen before. Similarly, the terrestrial globe from the beginning was created with all its elements, substances, minerals, atoms, and organisms. But this only appeared by degrees. You know, I don't have much to go through everything because we have read Abdullah's statement before and we have talked about this because we ran out of time. Well, let me just show you this here. I hope everybody can see this. So this is the human evolution as we know it, or the theory of evolution. There was one cell, multi-cell, then became land animal. This is 350 billion years ago. 300 million years ago, sorry, 250 million had mammals and eventually get to Homo sapiens. So what I'm trying to say is that even though all these things existed, the existence from the beginning of the universe, this was this Insani Kamil, the idea as an idea has always existed from the beginning. The idea of a human being, it didn't matter in what form it really appeared initially, and that is what a lot of Baha'u'llah's Abdullah's talks said. Man from the beginning was in this perfect form and composition. And there is also other statements by Abdullah when he said the philosophers of the East, and Abdullah in the Baha'i writing, Plato and Aristotle are combined with the concept philosopher of the East, not philosopher of the West. He said they believe that humans have two natures. One is the human nature, the other is a physical nature. While the philosopher of the West believe humans have only physical nature. Because you see, Abdullah was talking about 100 years ago, about the time when Darwinism was thriving. Everybody was thinking, you know, we come all from animals and so on and so forth. So they were shifting toward this. But Abdullah was going, no, to the point that there is not only we have the animal nature, but also we have a spiritual nature. And that is what he was referring to those things. And okay, the first mineral, then planet, afterward animals, and finally man. You see, Abdul was talking about evolution. Man from the beginning was in this perfect form and composition. He could not have meant, you see, this is totally contradictory if you just think you take everything physically. No, Abdul was talking should not be taken physically. Abdul was talking should be taken as a general term. It's not a scientific exploration. It is a philosophical statement. And if you take it philosophically, then it makes sense. You see, the idea of a human being was even there, even before the Big Bang, even before the creation of the universe, even if a universe never existed. And Abdul mentions many times that if the situation is right, and you give another Earth, which has exactly the same condition, now we have, they call it exoplanets. And we think they have several hundred exoplanets in a lot of suns. You know, Bayrati talks about that. Pablo mentioned that there are other beings in other planets. So, you know, they think several hundreds of them, no, sorry, like 17 of them, they think they may have life on it. But we are just, again, we are on the beginning of this journey of the discovery. So, man from the beginning was in this perfect, I think we talked about that. And we had talked about this before. My conclusion, because I think we're getting there, is this, based on what was discussed. Again, this is my understanding. You remember the graph? I showed you the lines. I hope you remember all. So this is what I think. I don't know. And this is thrown in for discussion, not really with any kind of attachment. That evolution has been and is continuing to take place. The purpose of the creation of the universe was and is development of an intelligent and spiritual being who is capable of asking questions about his or her origin, purpose, and destiny, and who has the capacity to recognize the supreme being whose word is the cause of the creation of the universe and the cosmos. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We have about 10 to 15 minutes for questions.
Or comments, please. I had to show your cat. Dr. Mehta, I had to show your cat. I have no other choice.
No, that was wonderful.
Yeah. It has not run away, it's still there.
But you were being kind to it. The cat is not either alive or dead. It's simultaneously both alive and dead.
Okay, well, that is
Until you observe it, then it becomes real.
Become real. Okay, that's good. Thank you for the clarification. Go ahead, please.
I was wondering if this explanation you gave couldn't also be seen as Abdu'l-Baha's statement has to do with participating in the unity of the creation. That the creation is created for the evolution of the potentials of the human, and that the human is participating as an aspect of that creation.
Could be.
So there's an internal, integral unity being pointed at by these concepts.
Yeah, that's very interesting insight. Thank you.
This reminds me of the, like the consciousness studies and people talking about intention, and mankind creates through intention. I have an idea of creating a summer school in Northern California. And so I imagine it to be perfect. And I see it in its perfection. And then it gets built, starting out with a little, I don't know how it started out here, a few little cabins. And eventually it becomes the great summer school that it is. But it reminds me of that same idea that when we use intention to create, you know, we have a plan, right? That we do that same thing. We intend it. We imagine it in its full capacity, even though we start by building a brick house or whatever.
Yeah, well, that is exactly the same analogy. That's a good analogy. That yes, this idea has existed, even though it has not yet materialized. To put it the other way. So the idea of we may not be there yet. You see, because if you really look at it, human evolution has not really, we have not been there for a long time. It's only 160 or some years ago, Well, what about, just imagine yourself how it will look in 2,000 years, 5,000 years, 100,000 years, or 1,000,000 years from now. You may be totally different looking animals, or beings, or whatever you want to call it. So we really don't know. So the fact is that that only the Supreme Being knows where the end point might be. But the fact is that we are evolutionists, we are moving ahead. You know, for example, just give you an example. Nowadays in medicine, you see a lot of people who have artificial knees. You think this Floyd knows about evolution?
It always goes to sweet thing.
Yeah, he goes down here.
It didn't bother me, there was no sweetness there.
I know. But so we don't know really how we're looking. Now you're looking, you know, you have pacemaker, you have part of the heart is you know, artificial, you know, so you never know how we are going to look in future, you know. How do you know? Maybe in future our finger will be so sensitive we could read with it. You know, it could be. Because you see that the ectoderm, which is the outer skin, is made as the same stem material, which is your brain. You see, so they could change, made of your nerves. You know, so the same cells initially that makes your skin and your brain and our nerves is exactly the same cells, and they differentiate later during the embryogenesis or during the embryonic period. So who knows? So you're right, because as an ideal has existed, but that's what my point was. The whole thing is that when we read the Baha'i writing, how do we go about this? You know, we have to be conscious of the fact that there is a principle of harmony and science, and what Abdullah was saying, you really should. Personally, I don't think we should take it literally. He was referring in a general term. He was talking about evolution and change in a general term. On the other hand, he was saying that the idea of a perfect human being has always existed, and that's what he's referring to. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm glad you explained all this, because I always thought human beings were an afterthought, which seemed like a good idea at the time.
God hears us, maybe he takes it back, I don't know.
My understanding.
Probabilistic was probably a bad idea.
So just to clarify what you're saying, are you, so your model seems to allow for the possibility or allow for the idea that human beings evolved from apes, yet the idea of the perfect man still existed. So and that there's no contradiction within the Baha'i writings for that to happen.
Absolutely.
Is that
Absolutely.
my understanding?
I think one of the mistakes everybody makes. Everybody. We say humans are animals. No. You see, we have animal nature. Our bodies are like any other animals. You have to eat. Your metabolism is the same as many metabolism. When you look at it, biochemistry is exactly the same as other animals. Except you're at a higher level, you have different things. For example, when this monkey was there was no humans. You see, it was not that there was a monkey and slept next morning he became a human. You see, so if you go like 4 billion years ago, our common ancestor was one cell. If you go, for example, 350 million years ago, our common ancestor was land animal, maybe mice. Okay, and then eventually, say, 34 million years ago, common ancestor was monkey. That doesn't mean that, because many people say, oh, we are all animals. No, nobody's saying that. Right? So I think
Abdullah talks a lot about capacity and potential, and we're using those terms a lot. And the capacity and potential, you can't really say, and even refers to the human soul as capacity and potential. Baha'u'llah says it's the capacity to manifest all the names and attributes of God that delineates the soul. So where the capacity existed in those elements of creation, we don't know, because it's like looking at the seed and trying to see the tree, and you don't see the tree. So when what animal had the capacity to become human? In other words, we're potentially human. We weren't human. We were potentially human. But Abdul-Baha says that potentiality is the humanness.
Yeah, I understand your question. I didn't show it this time, but last time I went through it about human soul. Okay, this takes a few minutes, but if you don't mind, I will try to explain it the way I understand. You see, the purpose of our life in this life is not the physical being here. Is to develop perfection for the next world. Okay? What that means we have to make what? To make choices. We have to make choices. Now, we have to make choices. What part of our brain makes choices is our front lobe.
Our front lobe is the seat where we can make choices. If our front lobe is destroyed, we cannot make choices. We don't know what is bad, what is good. You cannot correlate things. So we have to, when you look at the animals and humans, at the moment that there are, if you look at the monkeys' brains, I have it, but I don't have it today here. You will see that the forehead, let me show you myself. So the monkey's forehead is like this because the front lobe is a lot less well developed in other animals. And the more higher animals, you go like a hominid and so on, you see the front lobe is better and better developed. So with the development of the front lobes is associated with choice making. Because we are the only animal that we can make choices. We are not part of the, even though we are part of the nature, but we can change the nature. And the only animal that I don't know, there's nothing in the writing to tell you, and I don't think anybody can go back and tell you. But what happens when they find fossils of the early humans, they can, you can see all the lines, they call it fissures and everything, you see inside. You can make a mold out of that and duplicate the brain of some of these hominids. And the first one, they call it Homo habilis. He was living about 2.5 million years ago. And he had a Broca center. Broca center is a place where it makes us able, we would be able to talk and write and communicate with each other. So I think if anybody would have been endowed with this task of making choices, would have been Homo habilis. You know, but again, this is a very important question, and because this is the difference in the writing that humans have soul, animals don't. At what point that was really came to being, I cannot tell you, but my guess is somewhere around 2.5 billion years ago from the records that we have. Because Homo habilis had those, they call it handyman, because he could use his hand. And he had a Broca center, and his brain was better developed than others. I don't know if that was what you were referring to. I am, but also there's a spectrum of capacity being developed. There's a spectrum, but what I understand is the potential. When Baha'u'llah says he tore apart the entire universe and put it all back together with fresh new capacities. Now, everybody was walking around talking when that happened. So what he's talking about, the capacity being infused into the universe to follow his teachings, is something that it has a different quality than the physical. And so I'm not so sure that the frontal lobe development is really when we had the potential to be human, because the humans who got infused with the new capacity in Baha'u'llah's lifetime, it was not a physical change, but they were given a new capacity. And that new capacity is spirituality. So it didn't require something physical for that. You see what I'm saying? And so the capacity, there's things in the writings that maybe we weren't in one cell, maybe we did come from the apes, but I always understood that God created the potential to be human, and even if that was an atom, that he created that with the potential to be human. Well, it wasn't physically based in the atom, because the physical part is not where the purpose lies. Anthropic principles that we discuss and others, because that goes to this, that even before the universe was existed, this intelligent idea has existed. The intelligence was with God. And through gradual processes, it emerged eventually. Yeah.
So are you saying that, let me see if I understand, that from the time that the spirit and this capacity of choice was instilled in human being, that's when human being was created, the beginning of human being. Maybe Adam is the beginning of that time. Prior to that, when this was not instilled in it, and we had instinct, you know, animals had instinct, it differentiates the human being.
But that is not corroborated by scientific knowledge. Because James Ussher went back. If you look at James Ussher was an Irish priest. He went back and looked at the Genesis, if you look at the Old Testament, New Testament, if you give all the Genesis of Christ, all the way to Adam. And they counted all the years, and he came about that the world was created, and Adam was created in 4004 BC,
October 23rd, and he didn't know it was in the morning or in the evening. But that was the only thing. But no, I'm just saying, what I'm trying, this is my understanding is that there is no scientific thing to corroborate that all of a sudden, you know, Abdul Baha explains actually that, in the writing explains that what that Adam and Eve means. They are the first people to have spiritual understanding. That doesn't mean that they didn't have a soul before.
I didn't say that.
How can you say not?
You mean before Adam?
Absolutely.
Oh.
How do you know?
How
do you know? No.
I don't. I'm saying from
I'm
the
saying
time
I don't know it either. But I do know.
I'm
But I
saying,
think
are you
we cannot. No, I think I cannot explain that because from anatomical standpoint, humans have not evolved or changed that much since time of Adam, because this is about 6,000 years ago, right?
So evolution has stopped?
Sorry?
So evolution has
Oh
stopped?
no, evolution has. Let me tell you. Do you know like a blue eyes and blonde hair? You know how many years ago this was created? 10,000 years ago. They have done genetic studies and have found out. As a matter of fact, one of the things that you know, going over time, 10,000. 12 to 10,000 years ago. And when we came out of Africa, we couldn't tolerate milk. And the milk intolerance and milk tolerance eventually was developed, and the gene for that was developed during the last 10 to 20,000 years ago, because when we learned how to domesticate the animal and became from being hunter and gatherer, became used agriculture, horticulture and agriculture. So these are we are evolving. We are evolving a lot more than what we did before. So there's no question about evolution. We are evolving. And as a matter of fact, I was trying to tell you this, that Abdul Baha mentioned something very interesting. There are three things in the Baha'i faith. One of them is, Baha'u'llah says that the heat was generated. So he's the first one, to, as far as I know, to talk about the Big Bang like that. The other one is Abdul Baha's statement when they asked him, what about the difference in races? He mentioned that the difference is because of the environment. And scientists have shown that all the humans, they have done several studies and repeated that, thousands of individuals have been tested, that we all go back to one individual female in Africa. They call it African Eve. So if they were all black and they came from Africa, how come we look so different? Abdul Baha said it's due to environment. And the scientists have shown that, yes, environment can change our look, and it takes about 40 to 50,000 years to do that. The other thing is that Baha'u'llah predicted that, I have done a study on that, and hopefully, if I'm wrong, please let me know. When he mentioned that there is a force on earth, I think it is part of one of the Ishra'at that could evaporate the cities. That was said by Baha'u'llah in around 1870s or 1880s. And when I studied this, not that I didn't know about atom, but the fact was he predicted atom power. I'm talking about power in quotation marks. He talked about atom power, and nobody had talked about atom power till 1930s. And the first experiment about atom power was done in Chicago in 1942. The first experiment they made, that they said, yes, it was 1942. So there are these three things in the faith that about sciences that the faith has predicted. I have not seen that anybody has done it before them, but again, I may be wrong. Exactly. Tajalliyat, there are many tajalliyat. Baha'u'llah talks about that. Abdul Baha ironically talks to the Japanese ambassador near First World. That was even long before atom bomb. They didn't even know they had the power, Anyway, I think
your second bullet point is the short obligatory prayer. You could summarize it. Thou hast created me to know thee and to worship thee.
No, I just wrote it. I didn't really, but that maybe should add
that's the point of.
Sure, maybe we should add that too.
I know there's probably more questions. Is there maybe one final question?
This is a very elementary question. If I understood it correctly, you said that dogs come out of foxes, right?
No.
Out of
Wolves.
Wolves.
My question is that why some of the wolves decided not to change?
Some of the what?
Some of the wolves decided not to change.
Because the elk tastes them so good.
Really?
The answer is very simple. You know how it happened? Okay, think this way. Say all the wolves are roaming around. And there is a village.
There's lots of
Humans, you know, they have a hunter-gatherer, and just imagine yourself, they just hunted a deer, okay? And one of the pups of the wolves get lost, and he comes to humans, and they start to feed him. Just imagine, by that, some of his genes is very inactivated before get activated. And eventually, maybe there is another few wolves like that, and they would become tame. They're not really living with humans, but they were tame enough to come once in a while, grab some food from animal and run away. And eventually, the pups of those, say 10 generations later, were a little closer to animals. Because, to humans, I'm sorry. So what happened is, then eventually after 500 generations, some of them really couldn't live without humans, and they became dogs.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the whole selective breeding,
Yeah.
is that if you find qualities or traits in an animal, let's say that
So they got separated. And this is true. They have shown many things. As a matter of fact, for example, give you an example. There are salamanders. You know, some of them have eyes, some of them don't have eyes. And there was an earthquake, or what happened, some of them were trapped in a cave. After it, because they're totally separated from the other one. They have the same genes, they're the same salamanders. But what happened, they cannot see anymore because they don't, in the cave there is dark. They don't, the eye totally got lost. And when they brought them out, they cannot mate with each other. So they're separated species now. You know, so this has been proven. I mean, this is not a joke. This is proved every day. Yes.
Last week up in Berkeley Hills, I saw a fox with extremely long legs, which indicated that the fox had interbred with a dog. So you know this even happening in nature, that there's this crossing of breeds.
That can happen too.
Can I say something about this? I saw a Nova movie on that, so I'm very knowledgeable.
That's what I asked in the comments. Listen here, I know it, but thank you.
You know, dogs are one of the environmental impacts of human beings on this planet. We have many other impacts, you know, global warming, what have you. We took a group of dogs and over time, we domesticated them. It's not part of the natural evolution of wolves to become dogs. We did it. We have lots of impact. Chickens, cats, you know, it is, we kind of actually affected and directed their evolution in our particular way. That's one of our environmental impacts of having a bigger brain and so on and so on.
So the pup didn't wander up, we actually stole it from the dead?
No, the speaker is correct. You know, they came around, they were more amenable, and we kind of enhanced that tendency. And so dogs are our creatures, our creation.
This decision making has happened in other occasions too. There are fishes who didn't want to come out and remain in the water, and some of them decided to come out.
Yes.
This
The unfortunate ones came out the lucky
That's
ones.
right.
No, that was the impact, that's the impact of the environment. You see, you have to realize the human beings are part of the environment. For that dog who was separated, for that wolf who was separated from his other wolves, that was a remedy for, that was good for his survival because he needed the meat that they were giving him. You see, so eventually that dog got separated. This is all natural selection. This is part of natural selection. In action, actually.
Excuse me.
what can we do for humans?
A lot. You can go right now and have a tea, you know.
No,